All right, we're live. Hello, friends. Welcome to to Be Waste Wise. You're watching this thanks to the knowledge partnership between the International Solid Waste Association (ISWA) and Be Waste Wise. My name is Ranjit Annipu, and I'm a co-founder of Be Waste Wise. This partnership with ISWA is possible because of Antonis Mavropoulos, its president, and a lot of backstage work by Shweta Dandapani and Kim Chua from Be Waste Wise, and Anita Pawlik, Daniel Purchase, and Georgina Nich from ISWA. Thank you for all of this, for all of you, to all of you. And ISWA and Be Waste Wise will organize 4 more events this year. So subscribe to our newsletters and follow us on social media. Now, Be Waste Wise, we are the largest platform for video knowledge and live events in the circular economy and waste management sectors. We save thousands of dollars for companies, research and academic organizations, and nonprofits in reaching their target audience. Also, what better way to invest in our collective future than by investing in long-term, cost-effective, and easily accessible education? We have billions of people looking for solutions worldwide, but only a few thousand professionals in our almost baby sector who can provide those solutions. And Be Waste Wise model is one of the very few models available out there which can achieve that kind of scale. Now, this is the second event in this partnership. I'll be interviewing Dr. Costas Velis for 30 minutes, and then you can interview him with your questions and comments. To post your questions, use the live chat window below this video stream. You can find it very easily. And if you enjoy this gift of knowledge, please share it with your networks, email it to those who might be interested in this, and share it on social media. Dr. Costas Velis is an academic, a lecturer in resource efficiency systems at University of Leeds, and he is also the chair of ISWA's Task Force on Marine Litter. The task force published a report called Prevent Marine Litter Now. You can easily find it on Google or on ISWA's website. Just go there and then search for it. You should be able to find it really easily. It's the first search result. Now, the report looks at various marine litter mitigation mechanisms and provides a precise list of priorities on where we could focus our efforts. So we'll find what those priorities are from Costas, and also ask him about barriers, international aid, the role of informal recycling sector, the trends he's observing, and how different cities are managing this issue. So Costas, welcome to Be Waste Wise.
Thank you, Ranjit. It's a great pleasure to be with you and our audience today. This is a fantastic opportunity to discuss on such a hot topic. Also a difficult topic, so I hope you're going to ask me the most difficult questions, but let's see how this goes. Actually, you're an expert yourself, and it's a great pleasure and honor to have the ability to discuss with you today and share the work we have done in the International Task Force, International Marine Litter Task Force established by ISWA. So you mentioned the report. And one would wonder, why another report? Don't we have too many already out there? Who has the time to read any report anyway? Well, that's why we need events like this to distill the messages and pass it to greater and wider audiences. I think to answer your question, we've done the report because the timing was right. Dealing with marine litter or plastic marine litter is not a new topic. For instance, UNEP, the United Nations Environment Program, has been leading concerted efforts over the last 30 years to sensitize the audiences and tell us about this challenge. I think now, however, things are converging and are reaching another level of awareness and readiness for action. They're also reaching another level of amount of waste they are in our water, in our rivers, in our seas, in our oceans. So we've done this report because we wanted to make a bold, clear statement that the waste and resources professionals around the world, whose the International Solid Waste Association is representing, are here and are ready to take action and make a very significant contribution to the solution of plastics marine litter global challenge. So we say that we're here. We say that we are ready to put our knowledge and our determination to help solve this problem. The report goes a step further in detailing this statement. Now, we're both experts on solid waste, isn't it? You've spent so many years dealing with that. For us, it's obvious that a lot of the stuff that you see floating in the water has come from land and it actually has been solid waste. This does not mean that it's obvious to everyday people, but even to experts or decision makers or major influencers. So in this report, we took a major step forward in collating in the most unambiguous way all the evidence on how material that is unmanaged or poorly managed solid waste ends up in the water. Because we wanted to make sure that the world understands that the best way to have a solution fast on the problem of marine litter is to have better waste management on land.
Right. So what you're saying is earlier talking about marine litter, it was a very homogeneous set of people who were dealing with the issues in the sector. But with the influx of a lot of diverse voices, diverse stakeholders in it. So I think it was great timing to have this report to look at everything that's out there, all the mechanisms that are out there, and then kind of give that precise set of priorities. Was that one of the reasons, the influx of new stakeholders? Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. There are many more new initiatives at different levels. Maybe we can elaborate later on that. But definitely one of the key two things that happened that triggered also our intervention through the report and the wider task force activities, which I will cover in a while, was the first the seminal Global Waste Management Outlook commissioned by the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, and delivered through partnership with ISWA. So this ISWA UNEP Global Waste Management Outlook attempted for the first time an assessment of how the planet manages its waste. So there we've done a simple calculation, maybe it's a bit of a wet finger in the air or back of the envelope calculation, still it is a conservative one. What does it tell us is that there are at least 2 billion fellow humans that live without access to basic waste collection services. So those people don't have an option where to do your solid waste. They have to bury it, they have to drop it, they have to move it a bit away or throw it, dump it wherever they can, wherever they have the ability to do so. And this is, as said, is a conservative estimate. So this was one pillar, one key fact that alerted us even further and make us think, how does this impact on the plastic marine litter pollution challenge? The second was, of course, the arrival of the Sustainable Development Goals. Mm. And maybe we can see how various Sustainable Development Goals affect the relate to how the world manages its waste and its resources, waste as resources. And in fact, the Sustainable Development Goal 14, the target 14.1, calls for action to minimize and mitigate the pollution that comes, plastic pollution that comes, and weather pollution, debris that comes from land to the sea up within the next couple of decades. Now, to me, this was obvious that cannot happen without really addressing the other sustainable goals. For instance, the first one that relates to providing collection to our fellow humans, the Sustainable Goal 11, which is about sustainable cities and minimizing the impacts of absent waste management, the 12, which is about recycling, picking more and recycling more waste. All those things really relate and contribute to the Sustainable Development Goal 14.1. We won't be able to solve the problem if we don't address all those others which relate to solid waste. So these the two key new elements that really forced us and enabled us to bring this focus on this topic, linking sound waste management with prevention of plastic marine litter.
Right, right. And it's very interesting how you use marine litter and plastic marine litter very interchangeably. So I have a question, which is, why did you go with the marine litter? Why did you go with calling it marine litter as opposed to plastic pollution? Because I know there are groups out there with very good cause which say that they should be named plastic pollution because that's the crux of the problem that we're facing right now, with the advent of more plastics in our lives. Can you talk about that? Why did you go with that specific terminology?
Really told you not to ask difficult questions, but there you go. Okay, I'll be happy to answer this. Thank you. I guess there is some sort of, if you like, as things evolve, new fashionable terms appear, and the plastic pollution is a new version of some older things. Maybe it has a more clear focus, and it has also certain connotations that come with it. Marine litter was a far more established term. Of course, the litter thing maybe gives a wrong impression that it's just about littering. It's not just about littering, and it's not just litter that has been generated in the sea. So the term marine litter, yes, it is also not the best solution, but marine litter is more than plastics. Okay, we have to understand that. So the problem is not only with plastics, but of course, there's a lot of focus of plastics, and we indeed focused in the report and the task force also on plastics because it's the most prominent and possibly the most problematic of the solid waste items. So it's for historic reasons we went for the term that I think is better understood. The plastic pollution is not just about marine litter. We can talk about plastic pollution on the land also, or in the air. We have suspended microparticles of plastic as well in the air, which are deposited on land and on sea. But I would say that I would personally object to demonizing plastic. So the plastic pollution has a very strong connotation with make us think that plastic is fundamentally, inherently bad. And while this maybe helps some campaigners focus people's mind, I would say it doesn't help us really solve the problem because it doesn't really tell us that the major issue is how we're dealing with material. It's not the material that is problematic. Yes, the material properties contribute significantly to the problem, but the issue is how human societies are handling waste and resources.
So what you're saying is, I'll not get into details because we have only 15 more minutes to go before the questions from your friends start. So let's get to the next question. So what are the, so you've looked at many mechanisms across the board from many different sources on how to mitigate the problem. So can you talk about the three main priorities that you've put out there in the short term for the planet?
Absolutely, and I think this is exciting time because there's so many new players, as you said, so much emphasis on plastics. We hear a lot about circular economy of plastics. There's a lot of emphasis on microplastics, primary and secondary, and things like that. But the big fact is that, as we have hopefully demonstrated in the report, that if we don't turn the tap in providing waste collection for the 2 billion people around the world that live without it in the low-income countries, there is no hope to solve this problem. Point. So this is our key message and our first and utmost priority to the world. Provide safe, solid waste collection for all the fellow humans, for the 2 billion people in the low-income countries, in the informal settlements who don't have any option, whose waste is not collected, and hence has huge possibility to end up as marine litter. This is the first and most important priority and has the potential to deliver solutions very fast and at massive scale. In relation to that, of course, we should provide active measures to prevent open dumping and stop littering on land, and prevent also fly tipping, where the material is collected but then is disposed here and there illegally. We're talking about an illegal activity. And we have problems even in developing countries with that. And the third priority, even when you have a disposal, might be a dump site, might be an open or organized dump site, or even a landfill. Sometimes these dump sites are very close to rivers, very close to the sea, which generate a flow from that disposal place to the water, and you should put a focus also on closing down dump sites which are in close proximity to the water. So 3 priorities: safe collection for all, prevent open dumping, littering, and fly tipping, closing down open dump sites near water bodies. These 3 things can deliver massive solutions in the short to mid-term.
All right, great, wonderful. So what are the key messages? This is something that I want to get to before time runs out. What are the key messages that are currently lost in the noise, but everyone should know? And what are the trends that you're observing right now? Can you talk about that?
Right. I think this is a very open-ended question. There are so many trends emerging. One trend is about dealing the importance or the problems around plastics, of course. And I see a risk, as I said, in demonizing plastic, because it's an oversimplistic approach. It doesn't help us understand the systemic challenges we have, which relate, of course, to the materials and consumption, but as I said, relate to the lack of infrastructure and services. This is the most important issue. No infrastructure and services for waste collection in the low-income countries or in the poorest part in mega cities and things like that. I think also there is a trend around microplastics, both primary and secondary microplastics, focusing, shifting from the macro to the micro, which is great. There is a big scientific debate on that. I'm not going to go into any detail about it, but I'm saying that the pool of microplastics that emerges out of improper or absence of waste management is the huge pool for potential microplastics as they break down. So if we want to address the microplastics, we're much better off if we go upstream and collect this material, prevent it from reaching the water in the very first place. So I think this is a very important message as well. There is another trend about a huge appetite for solutions on the ground, right here, right now. This is good, because a lot of the funders now want to do demo projects or go to mass-scale projects about delivering collection infrastructure. However, I think we shouldn't forget the failures of the past on that. And a lot of the development agencies have a lot of expertise, and ISWA collectively as association has a huge amount of expertise of what can go wrong. So we should deliver infrastructure that is locally adapted, and also infrastructure that comes along with capacity building, and having the people on the ground able to manage their waste on their own. I think there's some key messages that might be lost into so much noise that is around on the topic, as you rightly pointed out.
Right, great. Derek Greedy, who's your friend, says that he was watching a news item where they were talking about microplastics, but the news reporter wasn't talking about the microplastics that Derek was aware of. So, so he says that there is a lot of confusion about terminology. But before we get on to more questions, we have only 10 more minutes for my part of the interview to end. And you can start with your questions and comments. So if you have any questions, use the live chat window right below your this video stream, and then post it. You can interact with Costas directly. And again, I just wanted to thank everyone. We have about 30 people watching it live now. Thank everyone for joining us, even though this was organized on such short notice. So thank you, and so let's get to the next question with Costas. Costas, could you talk about what different cities are doing to manage their wastes, and are there any efforts to document all of this?
Yes, I think there are lots of efforts. First, I would like to talk about what we're currently doing, because the report was the first step in the task force. And we're just now to start a major effort with the help of our sponsors. And I would explicitly like to take the opportunity at this point to thank them. We got substantial support by the Association of Waste Management of Sweden, of Norway, and of Veolia, and many other players. I don't have the time to say, and of course the whole team behind. And it's always a team effort, and we have a fantastic team at ISWA and international experts who work on that. So they do a fantastic job. Now, what is the next step as the part of the task force? We're going to look around different situations around the world, like an informal settlement, a river, somewhere where you have an open dump site close to the sea, and trying to understand much better the flows, the sources, the type of plastic waste we're having there, and what the amount we're having that is generated or deposited, and what are the possibilities and the mechanism to get into the water. So we're going to look at the localities, and this is very much relevant to cities, because huge problems are associated with the amount of waste generated in cities. So do bear with us and support our efforts, because we're going to be looking at close details. We're going to be releasing the first part, which relates to rivers, in the World Congress, ISWA World Congress, at end of October in Kuala Lumpur. And we're using the river that goes through Kuala Lumpur as the first case study. There's something else I might be doing. I'm going to be covering it at the very end, if we have sufficient time. Now, how the cities are managing their waste, you're going to tell me. Well, it's hard to tell, because there was no consistent methodology. But with a lot of international efforts, starting with the UN Habitat and GIZ, and supported by the consultancy Waste Aware, we were able now to have a very consistent methodology called Waste Aware Cities Benchmark Cities Indicators. Professor Wilson has provided a lot of academic leadership and thought leadership in that, and my good friend Andy Whiteman of Waste Aware also has been instrumental in supporting that. Now, this is a very important methodology, has been applied in over 50 cities around the world already, and at the moment is considered to contribute for the monitoring of the relevant Sustainable Development Goal 11.6.1. We are very happy to say that within the next couple of months, we're going to be launching a new portal where people can explore the data in various ways, but even can start exploring the possibility to become city profilers themselves and add more data. So please have a look at that. We'll also hopefully be able to start a project with GIZ and ISWA Sandek in Zurich, trying to see how cities deal with their waste and what flows from the cities to the marine litter as a flow diagram. We haven't started yet, but we're just about to start within the next month. I think these are two major developments, and we're very pleased. We hope that we'll both make a major contribution in understanding how the world manages the waste and how solutions around it can contribute in preventing plastic marine litter.
Okay, awesome, wonderful. So we have only 5 more minutes. I'll ask one last question, but before that, Georgi from Hungary says that he wants to thank you for inventing the Intera system. It was very useful for him, and he used it in his thesis, in his or her thesis. I'm sorry if I confused there. But my final question is, we talk about pollution and the impact it has on the environment, but then in addition to pollution, we also have many other problems in this world one being poverty. And so I wanted to ask you on how we could use the funding or the support that we can garner for marine litter prevention and mitigation, how we can use that to also address other problems like poverty or lack of jobs. Can you talk about that? Are there any pointers on which ways we can go? What's going on?
Yes, thank you, Ranjit, and thank you for the lead through the Intera. Intera is a methodology we developed a few years ago, trying to help interventions focused on inclusion of waste pickers, informal sector recyclers. Their conservative estimates say that are between 15 to 20 millions. Our work in these cities around the world has estimated that 0.5% of all urban populations in the global south survive through waste picking. Those are the people who pick the plastics and try to save it from getting into the wrong place. So I think there is a great opportunity there. We're talking typically about marginalized or impoverished or socially excluded society. We're talking about the urban poor. We're talking about waste experts also in picking and salvaging plastics and other waste items. So I think there is a great potential within the wider focus of providing service collections, but also increasing the recycling rates of plastics and enabling a circular economy of plastics, to build on the activities of those people, try to include them, trying to get them more organized to be able to work through cooperatives, associations, any other type of business they're willing to work and collect waste. Of course, there are lots of challenges. Not everything is rosy. When we're talking about the informal sector, there is some child labor that we would like to see being eliminated, and health and safety issues that we would like to see being seriously addressed. But definitely, there is a lot of potential there, and we have to explore how we can kill three birds with one stone, if you like, not just two. Prevent plastic marine litter, deliver sound waste management solutions on the ground, and help reduce poverty, providing livelihoods to the waste pickers, transforming them as the basis of a more modernized waste management sector. Huge opportunity, huge challenge, but we're here to try and do more on that.
Well, just three birds with a stone, that's not ambitious enough, Costas. But I just wanted to also add that when we're talking about plastics, this is an experience that I've had in a recent project I've been doing with the World Bank in Ethiopia. The main city, Addis Ababa, has good informal recycling and kind of systems to take up plastics and then recycle them. But then once we go outside the main city into any other city, even high quality plastics, which we generally would expect to be, gone into the informal recycling system, are just left on the streets. And I think this is a similar experience even Derek Greedy, when he was working, which he mentioned in one of our previous panels, when he was working in developing countries. So in Sierra Leone, for that matter. And so I think that is one issue also that's not talked about. And that's something that we should also include in our discussions on how we find solutions for that. And so with that, I'll end my interview. Now begins the interview from the audience. And we have a lot of questions. The first one, again, this could be a tough one. It's from Miriam. And she's asking, do you think the China ban will worsen marine litter problem even further?
Well, thank you, Mariam. As part of the ISWA Globalization Task Force, another ISWA task force 3 years ago, we have published through the University of Leeds a report talking about how the global recycling plastics chain depended solely on China. China was receiving over 50% of all the exports, and Europe was exporting over 50% of all was collected to China. I think we warned the world that this is not a really sustainable system, and we're not happy that the crisis arrived so far, but this was a crisis in anticipation, I would say. I think in this report, we pointed out also this theory about where the material flows, the waste flows around the world. And sometimes, especially if it's about undesirable or low-value flows, it flows on where there's the least environmental protection in place and the lowest wages in place. And China has been such a case for quite some time for the waste plastics, especially for the lower quality waste plastics. For many reasons, they don't want to play this role anymore. And there is a fear that other places will emerge that still will not have equivalent standards. And there's a fear that Africa might be the case. I think Southeast Asia is receiving a lot of material right now, but Southeast Asia is also at the very focal point of the international community for better waste management as we speak. So I think there's less risk about Southeast Asia. There's more risk about Africa to start receiving more used plastic of lower quality. Some of it will be mismanaged. Some of it won't be recycled and might be burnt on the spot openly or might end up in the marine litter. It is a contribution, but is not the main concern. The main concern still remains providing primary waste collection to the poor people around the world.
Right, sorry about that. I was just typing there, chatting there. So we have one more question. We have a bunch of questions. The next one is from Muhammad. He's asking, what about putting some effort on reducing the production of plastics and replacing it with alternative eco-friendly materials? Can you talk about that quickly? And then we can go to the next question.
Absolutely. I think it is absolutely clear that the current focus on better management and the whole plastic resources is the right focus and will generate results, generate impressive results within the next, I would say, 20 to 30 years. But I'm not sure what are the eco-friendly alternatives. For instance, if we're talking about urban poor in informal settlements who are using sachets, water sachets, or are using very small packaging products because they live day by day, they can't afford to buy massive quantities, they don't have the place to store them. So what is the eco-friendly alternative to that? I'm not sure. Of course, there's a lot of emphasis on bioplastics and biodegradable bioplastics, but the science is that we're not there. We don't have a full genuine water degradability into benign products. So there's a long way towards this direction. So I think a proper circular economy that maximizes the value of plastic as a material and rationalization in the use of disposable plastics, minimization, is absolutely on the agenda. But proposing these eco-friendly alternatives, we have to see things holistically through LCA studies. I'm not really convinced that we have at hand this so eco-friendly, functional, affordable solutions on the ground. Otherwise, they would be taken over and automatically. So a lot of research and innovation needed in this direction, and that's why it will take 10, arguably 20, 30 years to see effective solutions and transition through this pathway.
This reminds me of a recent report or white paper a lot of groups in Europe put together about oxo-degradable plastics. Recently, I think it was early this year or maybe end of last year. We could talk about that a little bit more, but that also reminds me that we wanted to talk about international aid. We wanted to talk about a whole lot of other topics, but we couldn't because of the lack of time. So if we have time, we'll get back to that issue of oxo-degradable plastics. The next question, this is from Brad Kelly. Brad Kelly was one of our panelists, and he's an expert on, he works at GBB, and he's an expert on MRF design and recycling. So his question is, first of all, he thanks you for the insight. And then his question is, do you feel that the Western industrial model of waste collection and disposal, where people and companies pay for the service, is sustainable in developing countries? And would it make more sense to reverse that practice to pay others for the waste? Your thoughts? I think what he's asking here is whether there's willingness to pay for these services in developing countries, and whether, well, the rest of the question is whether we can reverse that and pay others to do that for us.
This is hard to cover in just a couple of sentences, but I will try to do my best. As Professor Wilson from Imperial College London always says, and has demonstrated, even the poorest of the poor are willing to pay. So there is willingness to pay if they can see an improvement in their daily life. So when they have no collection, and you introduce in a collection, getting self-organized to do that, or having others helping them through a community-based organization, they're willing to pay something despite being so poor. Of course, we need much more producer responsibility. So product stewardship, producer responsibility, individual, extended, deposit schemes, all reverse logistics, all these different solutions are on the table. They are really needed to be able, especially, to add value to the secondary plastics. And of course, there is a lot of international aid that we need to invest in building the infrastructure and in building the capacity to have the collection and the recycling in place. Definitely, the complex automated MRFs we're having in the West, and I'm teaching that to my students, are fantastic. They can do a lot of job. But the most detailed sorting of plastics I've ever seen in my life was in a waste picker cooperative in Brazil, where we studied the way how they're sorting. They're sorting in over 20 categories of plastics, and actually they're using skills, knowledge, senses, tests that we have lost the knowledge here in the West. So we are really studying them to understand how they're sorting and to be able to transfer the knowledge in other communities of organized waste pickers around the world. So we need localized solutions. We need better financing and cash flows. We need a safety network through a wider responsibility of the producers. But also, we need to address the gap between the primary and secondary prices of plastics. This is a global challenge. It won't be solved tomorrow. And this is the fundamental reason why plastics does not have sufficient value to be collected and recycled, and then inevitably is prone to be disposed of and leak into the sea. So big challenges for different stakeholders, different actions. I hope I covered this, but it's a complex matter.
Right, great. Derek Greedy also says his experience in Sierra Leone is just as Professor Wilson mentioned, which is even the poorest will pay when they see improvement. I've seen similar experiences in Nigeria with one of our panelists. Bilikis Adebi's organization called Recyclers, where once people started seeing the improvement, they were participating. They were not paying though, and that brings me back to again Brad's question, which is it is a chicken and egg problem. Where you said, Costas, you said that we need a lot of infrastructure to go in, and then the payment starts. So it's like where do you start? You need the payment to start the infrastructure, and then vice versa. So it is a difficult problem, but again, it depends on the differences. For example, what you said, the high-value plastics and the low-value plastics. High-value plastics can be taken care by market-based, market-driven mechanisms. But for the low-value plastics, you need the infrastructure and other mechanisms in place. And it's probably very it has to go case-by-case basis. So, but again, even the poorest will pay if they see improvement. So I think we can end that question there.
Thanks, Derek, for confirming. Derek has huge experience. He worked all over the world, and we're delighted to collaborate within the International Solid Waste Association.
Wonderful. And I have 5 more minutes and some more questions. Um, so, I'm sorry, Costas, did you have something to say?
No, fire the questions towards me.
Yes. All right. All right. And so another question is from Muhammad. He's asking about the potential of energy recovery from plastic waste in marine litter. Could you talk about that? Resource recovery from the marine litter?
Okay. I think there are two things. There are the plastic that has already become marine litter, and we try to collect them. And there are a lot of efforts in that. There are also a lot of beach cleanup campaigns or land-based cleanup campaigns, and ISWA is collaborating, for instance, with the Let's Do It World, which are doing fantastic campaigns. Of course, Ocean Conservancy, which is a major player, have done fantastic work all over the world, also in beach cleanup campaigns and so on. Same here in the UK for the Marine Conservation Society. However, I think definitely I want to be absolutely clear on that. Although we have to have efforts and innovation trying to collect the material, the solution is stopping it from getting in there in the first place. So I'm not really convinced that these effective solutions exist as we speak, and we're not sure we will be able to develop, especially for if we go away from the macroplastics and we go to the smaller particles as things degrade into smaller sizes with the time. So we're not sure about the suitability also to be recovered for energy, because the properties of the materials change. And of course, if they're collected and are wet, of course, plastics do not absorb, but maybe just absorb waste. If it's too wet, maybe it doesn't make the best fuel. So I think I see a lot of challenges there, and definitely is not the right message that we have a solution there, we can implement it. Now, if we're talking about the plastics that are of lower value and that are unrecyclable, and there is a big percentage of this, of course, for instance, thermosets are this category of plastics that are not inherently recyclable as we speak. There is a great potential for energy recovery there, both in dedicated energy from waste plants, if you can afford one, which are very expensive, and if the wider mixture of waste of the country is suitable, or through solid recovered fuels, feeding cement kilns and other industry substituting other types of fossil fuels. So there are solutions towards energy recovery. They have to be taken into account, but they have to be affordable, and there are other technical complexities in that area, such as the chlorine content. Again, I don't want to get into details. It's part of the solutions, but we can't really see this alone stopping the problem. The problem is mainly a collection problem, is an open dumping problem, is improper flows from open dumps to the sea problem.
All right, great. We have just 2 more minutes, but we have a question to which you've answered just now, but I just want to make sure it's answered even in a different angle, in the angle that the question is presented, which is, Dr. Velis, what should be done in developing countries where there is no treatment technology? But then I'm going to ask you, in developing countries where there is no treatment or disposal technology, so what can be done? Is it just infrastructure, more infrastructure, or is there anything else that can be done there? Could you answer to this in 1 minute? And then we have one more question for which you have 30 seconds.
To arrive to the treatment, you have to collect the material in the first place. And you have to collect it for the right place, ideally not from a dump site, as most of the waste picking comes now from the informal sector. So organizing all the waste, primary waste collection, organizing the source separation of the plastics from the organic waste for recycling, I think is a critical part that will enable solution. Then you can go for simple mechanical sorting of the plastic and manual sorting, which the expertise lies within the remit of the informal recyclers. And then, if you can think, you can jump to much more complicated solutions if the society can afford and have developed the technical skills. But we need solutions fit for purpose localized, adapted to the local economy and conditions, for sure. We don't want white elephants. We don't want investment in hugely expensive facilities are going to become ghost facilities after 5 years.
All right, great. Ricardo is asking, what's the name of the Brazilian informal recycling cooperative that you mentioned? What's the name of it?
That was Costas Leste. I can give the details if they're very much, but is one of the 1,700 cooperatives that currently exist in Brazil. And there's far more people who are not part of these cooperatives. So Costas Leste was based in the outskirts of Belo Horizonte.
All right. And one final question is, it's interesting to know about this. Do you intend to do anything in India to synergize with Indian government's Clean Ganges, the Clean Ganges program? And there's a comment that ISWA wasn't doing much in India. So, and there's an invitation to collaborate. So you can answer to any one of those.
Well, that's great. India is always at our focus. Had the pleasure to visit India in the past. This is an amazing place. Huge of diversity, with also big problems with solid waste being uncollected. Interestingly, we just won a project at the University of Leeds. We're going to be working in India for the next 3 years. We would be delighted to hear, and that's an open invitation to the world's expert to liaise and interact with the task force. We want to join forces. And of course, if we have the resources, which means more support, external financial support, we hope to develop an engagement platform which will bring locally the expertise and the information needed to implement solutions on the ground. And hopefully India could be one of the places where you can do one of our case studies and also gather this much needed expertise. ISWA, International Solid Waste Association, wants to play this facilitator role. They have the expertise, the technical knowledge, and the responsibility to contribute to solving this global problem.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Costas. It was great. It's a great interview.
Thank you for the opportunity, and hopefully we will be here again at some point when we have more reports or outputs from the task force, and we would welcome your great dissemination skills to the big world out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Friends, so this is just our second event. We have 4 more events. Before we leave, subscribe to our newsletters, both ISWA's and BWasteWise, and follow us on social media so that you're updated on when the next event happens. And finally, I just wanted to mention Derek's comments on technology, which is we shouldn't get stuck with thinking that technology is the final solution, and even basic technology would work in alleviating some of these problems. So with that, I think we can end this session. Thank you again for joining us, and keep doing good. All right, bye.